All right. So I believe we are now live, everybody. Hi, welcome to Critical Q&A. For this week, I'm just sitting here finalizing my setup. There we go. Good. Just making sure everything is great, and it looks like it is. And of course, as I sit here right now, I realize that in my haste to get everything going this morning and set up for the questions and everything, that I totally spaced on getting some FigCam. So I apologize that we do not have video for you this week of my little bundle of furry joy. I actually took him out for a walk this morning. He's been great. He's now, the big personal update with Fig is that he is now able to be in bed with us overnight, just like Benson was. So we've kind of come all the way through with that. And yes, I thought I would dress appropriately for the weather, as always. In fact, I may just end up wearing Hawaiian shirts for the rest of my existence, given the fact that this year is going to be the hottest on record, and next year is all lined up to be more of the same. Let's go ahead and throw the chat up on the screen here. And also, let's get the usual Q&A. Yeah, it is going to reach 100 today in Denver. That is exactly right. In fact, it's 98 right now. It's hot, 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 hot. So, oh, that's very interesting. I can not only start a Q&A or start a poll that I could poll you guys on, but I could also turn this over to a members-only live stream. That's new, which I'm not going to do today or probably ever. But that's an option I have now. Please put your questions here. Setting up the chat here. Put your questions here. Good. Start that Q&A. All right. So now I've got the Q&A box ready to rock for your questions. I also have, we'll be kicking off today with an email question from Michael Yoder, who always has some of the best technical Scientology questions and stuff he likes me to answer, because I had thought that Michael was a former Scientologist, but no, he just digs into the Scientology materials and goes, "What is this?" and then asks me about it, and it's awesome because I get to clarify Hubbard's crazy nonsense. So it's always a good time. All right, so what did I want to kick off the show talking about? Not politics, but let's see here. I talked last week about the ADHD stuff, and I am seeing Alan Ricker, the guy who played Reacher on the Prime series, is so cool. This guy, he's out there talking about ADHD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. He's talking trash about Trump, which I kind of think is awesome. Anyway, he's saying all the things I'm thinking, and I'm sure a lot of other people are too. I've also been seeing, I saw today a video of a man who talked about all those horrible, awful people out there, those absolute destructive personalities out there who have been taking down flock cameras all over the United States. As you know, it's a horrible thing that people are doing out there, cutting down these things. And he talks in detail, in so much detail, about exactly how it is that these horrible people out there are going about the process of going to the store, exactly which tools they are buying, exactly which drill bits or cutting edges they are buying, and exactly how they are purchasing these undercover and not, paying with cash, not keeping receipts, how they are dressing down and in unidentifiable, face recognizable, face recognition software avoidance tactics. He's describing it all in enormous detail to lay out just how horrible these people are. And if you find those videos online, you should definitely watch and learn how all those horrible people are doing that horrible stuff. out there. Anyway, I am very, very much down for some of the sort of the citizen activism out there, that is going on. I think it's awesome. Really, really awesome. We are seeing people stepping up all over the United States against the data center nonsense, against the flock surveillance nonsense, and against the authoritarian Christian nationalist agenda that has been being set by this administration. And if you're someone who's watching this channel and supports that stuff, I really don't know what you're doing here, because this is all about cults and coercive control, and this administration is a cult, and it is all about coercive control. So, I don't know how you could possibly support all of that and then consume my content. I really struggle with that idea, actually, at this point. Not that I'm trying to divide my audience, it's already divided. I just am surprised to see people come around from the MAGA world and then ask me about my, Trump derangement syndrome and stuff. Like, really, at this point, you still think that's a smart thing to say? It's hilarious to me. Anyway, so again, no, politics. Okay, so I actually I will monologue a little bit about this, a whole different thing, which I think is really, really underdeveloped, under-talked about. And I've got a therapist that I'll be interviewing next week on this exact thing, so you will be hearing more about this on the channel. But I wanted to share with you some ideas about attachment theory. If you've read or are at all familiar with Alexandra Stain, she is a UK therapist and very, very knowledgeable about cults and the psychology of cults. And she's the one who wrote Terror, Love, and Brainwashing, and talks about this thing in psychology called attachment theory, and specifically applies it to cultic codependent dynamics and relationship dynamics that occur in these groups. And if attachment theory isn't something that you're familiar with, or doesn't just roll right off, the tongue for you as, oh yes, of course, attachment theory, I really recommend looking into it in the same way that I recommend looking into boundaries and neurodiversity and there's things adjacent to coercive control that amplify or, make it worse in some ways. And so, or enable it to happen or be allowed in the first place. Why would people allow boundary violations? Why would they let people in that they shouldn't, and then not know how to kick those people out or how to get rid of that predatory behavior? What's up with that? Well, there's other things going on than just master manipulation and hypnotism and influence techniques. Those are all 1,000% valid things that we need to know about to understand how predators do what they do. But in order to understand ourselves and our own susceptibilities, I'm not going to say weaknesses, I mean, I guess you could use that word, but really susceptibilities to coercion out there, we need to understand ourselves. We struggle so hard to understand the predator and the predatory mind, and we look to, the billionaires or the other serial killers or murderers or these really, really like out there extreme personalities, and we go, oh, those guys are mutants, horrible, awful, genetically, awful people, and that's the reason why the world is awful. And I'm like, well, yeah, and and there may be something to learn about ourselves in this whole process. And if there's any theme to my channel, I guess it would be that, right? That help enable those guys to do what they're doing. Why do they get away with it? Well, because an awful lot of us are susceptible in various ways to what those guys do, and on a personal level too. I'm not just talking about some big social meta view, but the predator at work, the predator in the bowling club, the predator, you meet on a dating site. these folks are out there, and why are we susceptible to them? Well, if you look at attachment theory and see how it is that we form relationships, what patterns exist in that? Yeah, because there are patterns. There are ways we go about believing we are supposed to relate to other people, or because somebody does or says certain things that remind us very, very subconsciously of stuff that was happening to us before we could even talk, when we were still in our cribs, when we were still in learning the very basics of life. That time period, that formative time period, as they say, has everything to do with who you are now and how you form relationships now. And if you didn't know that, now you do, right? Now you know something new and something to look into. If you haven't looked into it or know much about it, it's worth your time. I found it to be incredibly illuminating as to, understanding how people work. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there without getting on some big soapbox about what attachment theory is. It's interesting, but there's a lot to it. Yes. Exactly, along with Yanya Lalich. Yeah, I definitely very, very, very much appreciate Yanya, as you guys know. She's been my hero for quite some time. All right, well, we have questions coming in, which is awesome, and let's go ahead and get started, this being a Q&A show and all. Oh, I totally should have brought something. I wonder if I can let me just do something here really fast. I've never done this before. Well, I'm live, but I'm relaxing a little bit in front of the camera. Oh, by the way, speaking of relaxing a little bit, I wanted to ask you guys about the washed out look. I lowered the lights in here, and I'm wondering whether I might need to, one of the other things I'm going to do this week is strip down the camera I use and make sure the lens and everything is like super, super, super clean. I haven't done that in a while, and the filter that the lens goes through on the teleprompter up there, I'm going to make sure that those things are super, super, super cleaned off this week as well. I didn't think about that till literally sitting down here prepping for the show. I was like, here's something else I could do in addition to the lights. But you guys let me know. I know it's still a bit, thank you so much. I know it is, it's been described as washed out, and I don't want to have a washed out look, so I want to do anything that I can to fix that. So you guys let me know if this is any better this week or not. Did the light change help at all, or am I barking up the wrong tree, or looking for something? Do I need to do something different? Okay. All right. So I have done a little prep today. Here was something interesting. I don't know if you guys have ever run into this, by the way, but I have this external hard drive that I can carry around with me that has all my cult-related documents on it. My entire Scientology library, Mormon library, Treble Teen Industry library, evangelical library. Like, I've got a lot of stuff I've accumulated over the years in terms of digital documents that I keep to, be able to look into various things about these groups or have the references to hand. And really extensive Scientology stuff, which you're going to see a little bit of today. But it was funny how I plug it into my computer, and if I plug it into the USB port next to my wireless keyboard mouse setup, then it nullifies the signal for the keyboard and the mouse, which is really annoying. But interesting. It's really interesting how electronics works and stuff, Anyway, thought I'd comment on that for no reason whatsoever. Deepen the gamma. Yeah, sure. Okay, good. So we'll see if I can do any adjustments. Actually, I wonder. Well, I'm not going to do that right now while I'm on air, but I'll look into that. Yes, I did mention also last week that I should look into the adjustments I can make within OBS to the camera image. So OBS adjustments. All right, thank you for your patience with me, guys, as I try to keep notes for myself here as to what it is I need to do so I don't forget. It is one of the biggest problems with the, I don't know if it's ADHD or if it's just being human, but boy, you know, the forgetfulness, can be so annoying. All right, so let's get to your questions, starting with this one from Michael Yoder, and that question is, in a lecture to auditors from 1954, LRH talks about isness and consideration, and that if you consider there is no isness to a thing, it disappears. And if other people don't understand the isness of your isness, it'll also disappear because of their consideration. So considering a thing as isness seems more important than the thing itself. Seriously, the first 10 minutes alone hurt my brain. Also, can you explain mood drills? Just heard about them. Thanks. Okay, Michael, thanks for these questions. So today I am going to show you all. I have answered or discussed. Nope, not that. I have not. Apparently, I'm not going to show that to you. Oh, I think I know why. Okay, I think I know why. There it is. Okay, good. Now let's see if I can bring this back on. There we go. Okay, this little bit right here is an excerpt from the book Scientology 0 to 8. Let's see if I can get you guys to see this here. It's going to cover the comments for a minute. Let me make sure that that's coming up on the screen. Well, I can't now. Okay, just going to have to trust that it is. All right, you guys let me know if there's an issue with that. So, the Scientology Axioms are amongst some of the craziest stuff you would ever read, next to maybe Hubbard's affirmations. The Scientology Axioms are Hubbard's attempt to science or bring scientific concepts to Scientology, inspired by Aleister Crowley. I didn't bring it out with me, but there's this thing that Crowley wrote called the Book of the Law, and I believe there are axioms and numbered items in there as well, which I believe Hubbard was inspired by. And isness, okay, so these four, axiom 11 is what we're going to be looking at here. Because I thought, I've explained this a few times, and I thought, let's just show you what Hubbard actually says. And you can see as isness is kind of highlighted there. But axiom 11 is the axiom that explains reality, basically, according to L. Ron Hubbard. How is it that things exist? Right? That's the answer to that's the question that Hubbard is answering. How is it that if a thetan is a no mass, no wavelength, no space, no time entity that exists and yet doesn't exist, it's a nothingness that is a somethingness, as I like to say, right? Then how is it that nothingness creates a somethingness? How does it create things that you and I believe are real, right? This is not real, according to L. Ron Hubbard. It's real to the degree that we consider it's real. Let's be super clear about what Hubbard says, right? He doesn't say it's not real in the same way that you read Richard Bach in Jonathan Livingston Seagull, or in what was that other book he wrote? Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. If any of you 70s hippies remember that stuff. I sure do. I was, I thought Richard Bach was really onto something back in the day. And he talks about how all of this is just an illusion. None of this is real at all. Well, Hubbard says it's real enough because you and I consider it is real. And it is the thetan's considerations that actually are the thing that generates or creates everything. In fact, I could go back up here. Let's take a look at these axioms of Scientology. Let's take a look at some of the earlier ones there. Because Hubbard says axiom 1 is life is basically a static, right? And this is the thetan. A life static has no mass, no motion, no wavelength, no location in space or time, as I was just going over. It has the ability to postulate and perceive. Postulate and perceive. That's what Hubbard says thetans do. The static is capable of considerations, postulates, and opinions. And space, energy, objects, form, and time are the result of considerations made and or agreed upon, not by the static, agreed upon or not by the static, and are perceived solely because the static considers that it can perceive them. That's really the key one right there, axiom 3. In terms of explaining what I just said, in terms of how Hubbard explains what I just broke down for you, right? It is the thetan's consideration alone that creates things, and energy consists of postulated particles in space, and objects consist of grouped particles. So Hubbard really breaks it down very, very simply that all of matter, energy, space, and time exists because thetans consider it exists. And then we get to this thing with the axiom 11, where he decides to take a simple idea and make it insanely complicated. And it always is a mind bender for people to try to break this down or explain it. Let me just check in here, make sure we're all, yeah, okay, good. But let me try. So, as-isness is the condition of immediate creation without persistence. Hubbard differentiates needlessly, but he differentiates this concept that when a thetan considers a thing to exist, all right, boom, here's a pen, I have just created it as a thetan, boom, there it is. An as-isness. I have created this isness right here. This is the thing. But Hubbard says it won't persist. No idea why, but it won't, right? It exists at the moment of creation and the moment of destruction, and is different from other considerations in that it does not contain survival. You simply put a thing out there and it exists for like a microsecond of a microsecond of a microsecond or something. It has no time connected with it. There's no persistence. Okay. So in order for a thing to persist, and this is the little trick that Hubbard needs to introduce into this, in order to, there is a reason Hubbard does this, right? In order to make all of this bad or wrong, Hubbard then says, alterisness is the consideration which introduces change and therefore time and persistence into an as-isness to obtain persistency. A little bit redundant there, but what he's basically saying is, if you want this pen to continue to exist, you have to tell a lie about it. You have to alter something about its as-isness in order, and that process, or that what you're doing is introducing alter-isness. You're taking the purity of the existence of a thing and you're altering or changing some part of it so that it will continue to exist, because Hubbard says the only reason that things persist is because there's a lie connected to them. So isness, or as-isness, is the thing that exists at the moment of creation. It's also the exact same moment of destruction. The thetan twists, enters a twist into it, right? And here's an example of how that what that might look like, is that I'm happy Joe Thetan, boink, I create a pen, and here's happy Bill Thetan going, well, I don't, or maybe he sees that I've created this thing, and I go, you created it. And Bill's over there going, no, I didn't, right? But that lie, that change in ownership of who created it, allows the pen to persist through time. That is the simplest way I know how to explain as-isness and alter-isness. And then there is, of course, this not-isness where you try to destroy it by force. And that not is it, and it only makes it worse, and you build up more mass. And this was Hubbard's twisted up, weirdo way of explaining why engrams and why trauma, why charge stays with you, right? Why a thetan can't just boink, make it all go away, right? In order to make it all go away, you have to as-is it. You have to examine it and so thoroughly that you are able to perceive or understand or consider the thing at its most basic level, down to the moment of its creation, and by doing so, you make it go away. It's gone. And this is what auditing is supposedly doing, is you are going back and not only reliving past moments of pain and stress, you're as-ising those moments of pain and stress by seeing everything about it, including its moment of creation, and thereby nullifying and destroying it with your thetan laser beams, right? With your thetan ray gun, as Hubbard describes it. So enough of that, but that's what isness and consideration, that's the explanation for it in Scientology, right? That's how it breaks down. Pretty goofy stuff, if you ask me. Overly complicated, overly nonsensical. It begs more questions than answers, right? There's an awful lot of, well, yeah, but why, kind of, thing there. Like, well, why, if a thetan, if it's true that a thetan creates by postulates, why can't I, an infinitely powerful super god being, in my native state as a thetan, I'm super god, right? Why can I not create a thing and just create it so that it will persist? Why do I have to lie about it? Why do I have to enter in an alter-isness? Well, Hubbard says it's because you're not able to allow it to persist because you can see it you perceive it exactly precisely how it is, and that is what makes it vanish. That doesn't make any fucking sense. That one piece of information right there. But if I'm looking at it and perceive it as it is, it goes away. Why? Why? Well, Hubbard's explanation doesn't satisfy me. Well, right, because you have to enter a lie. You have to alter it. Why? Why can't I simply allow a thing to be in the state I created it and have it persist through time as part of my postulate? There's no answer anywhere in Scientology materials to that question. You just have to accept that it's alter-isness and not isness. Okay. Now, as far as mood drills go, mood drills are a particular way of doing TR1. Okay, so when you're doing the Scientology training routines, TR1 is the drill where you read, say something out of Alice in Wonderland. You take a line out of Alice in Wonderland, a quoted line, right? We called him Tortoise because he taught us, right? And you deliver that line so that the other person can hear it, and that's TR1. But mood drills are where you take the Scientology tone scale and you start at the bottom or the top, I can't remember which one, and you deliver the communication, you do the same thing, you take a random line out of Alice in Wonderland and deliver it to the coach, but you also create within yourself, you mock up the mood or emotion that is that you're out on the tone scale, and you go through all the tones. So you might start at 0.01, right, apathy, And I think that's apathy, right? And because you don't start at minus 40.0 total failure. That's not a body emotion. Total failure minus 40.0 is a state of as an emotional state that only a thetan can experience. You don't really show total failure with your body. So you start at 0.01 or whatever, and so apathy, right? So instead of saying with good TR1, you don't say, well, we called him tortoise because he taught us. You have to deliver it in an apathetic tone. So you kind of won't really look up at the coach, and your voice kind of goes down, and they called him tortoise because he taught us. This kind of like apathetic sort of tone. But the guy still has to hear you. And then you go from apathy up to, fear or grief or whatever, all the tones. And there's a bunch of them. And that's practicing delivering communications at different emotional states. And the reason that mood drills are done is it's usually a corrective action for an auditor who has a fixed or non-optimum emotional state that comes across in the way they are auditing or communicating. So if the auditor is deemed to be auditing, from a low tone, then they are assigned mood drills. So they at least, we don't really care how you feel, right? It is better to look good, darling, than to feel good. There's a call back to minutia. Anyway, you are drilled on this to practice these tone levels so that you can deliver a communication at any tone at will, and it's not a problem for you. So that's mood drills. Okay, enough of that nonsense. All right, let's pop over to get to close that window. All right. Let's get to your questions now. Where is it? There it is. All right, let's go to the top. X-Cyan. Interesting interview with Michael Blanding you posted Saturday. Thank you. I loved talking to him. Very, very smart guy. That was fun. I knew a little about Hobby Lobby, but what are the controversies with Coca Cola? Are you going to boycott either or both? I'm clearly not boycotting Coke, but there are issues and problems. Yeah. Mike's book was called The Coke Machine. I think it was 2011 it was published. And apparently it discusses Coca-Cola as an entity, as a corporation, and the sort of abusive behavior that it is engaged in third world countries in order to have Coke produced there at the lowest possible rate, including apparently strong-arming locals or people in these countries with local getting involved with paramilitary groups, revolutionaries, various people, terrorists. I don't know because I didn't read the book, but this is the assertion is that Coca-Cola has been in bed with some pretty unsavory characters to use violence or force to get their way in creating or running manufacturing plants to make Coca-Cola. So there are specific accusations that Michael Blanding made in that book, bringing things to light that Coca-Cola has been up to as a corporation. I don't know that it's that he's saying anything false in all of that. I think all of us know that when it comes to shareholder value and creating shareholder value in America, the ends justify the means. And corporations at the C-suite board level, can often engage in some pretty immoral behavior that they would not, be proud to tell their mother about, in order to increase profits. And it's, we've lived in a profit over humanity world for quite some time. So Coca-Cola is just another example of how that manifests itself. I'm not to let Coca Cola off the hook in any way, because I don't. But I have to wonder, with every single international corporate conglomerate enterprise, right, that they aren't all engaged in those activities to one degree or another. And it sucks. It absolutely sucks. It's so unnecessary that we live that way. But the violence that people perpetuate upon one another is as old as the hills. It's as old as our cooperation, right? We do both equally well. We're amazing cooperators, and we can show amazing degrees of compassion and empathy for each other and get along with one another in the most stellar ways to create, either societies, civilizations, cultures that we can be proud of and that are amazing. But at the same time, the same people in very similar circumstances can become absolute monsters and engage in tribalistic violence, so, to destroy other people and salt the earth, right? So that nothing can ever grow there again, kind of thing. We're both things at the same time, and I am still myself struggling to fully accept that concept, but it's just a truth. So it sucks that we are that way. Hey, Hun Pods, how many times were you made to go to see Battlefield Earth? 5 times. I had to see it 5 times in the theater opening weekend. 3 times one day. Was it 2 times one day and 3 times the next? Yeah, 2 days, 2 times on Saturday. Yeah, maybe it was 6. It was definitely at least 5. I think 5 was all I could take. I think I did 2 on Saturday and 3 on Sunday, and I was like, my eyes were watering. It was just so, I hate, because when you have to watch a movie that is really, really bad, and then you have to watch it again, and then you have to go back the next day again and again and again, it was a lot. I love movies, but it was a lot. Yeah, I was really bored. XJW, yeah, it sucked. Thanks. Yeah, brutal. That's the right word. XJW Vernon, did Hubbard personally write Science of Survival and Scientology Ethics? Are they easy to understand? Apparently not. Okay, so what we know about the book 2 of Dianetics, the book called Science of Survival, was published in summer of 1951 after Hubbard had absconded with his daughter, Alexa, and gone off to Cuba. Apparently in a drunken binge, from the reports that we have, he dictated the basics of the chart of human evaluation, which is what we now know as the tone scale, became that, and and this book, right, Science of Survival. So it's a chart, and it's a book built around the chart. It basically, every chapter of the book describes some column of this chart and gives you the Thetan theory, the Theta Mest theory, which was the Hubbard's foray into explaining spirituality, explaining what life force is, what the energy is that constitutes life itself. So that's what Science of Survival was. But apparently he didn't actually write the book. He dictated whatever he dictated on these plastic green discs on this dictaphone device. And then Richard DeMille actually did the writing from that. It would be absolutely fascinating to hear what it was that Hubbard actually dictated and what notes he had that DeMille had to turn into Science of Survival. But needless to say, it was a horribly written book. Miscavige did more revisions of that book than any other book of Dianetics and Scientology when the Golden Age of Knowledge happened. What was that, 2004, 6 or something, right? When the new books came out. I was on the RPF at the time. I'm always a little unclear on the dates, but anyway, that's Science of Survival. And it was a book packed with run-on sentences. So I don't know how much DeMille changed or how much he tried to transcribe exactly the ideas Hubbard was saying, because Hubbard would ramble and the sentences were very, very long, and there were lots and lots of commas and semicolons and shit, right? And this was the book that Miscavige proudly said, yeah, we got rid of 500 or 1,000 semicolons or something, right? Just this ungodly number of semicolons in that book, trying to join these sentences that really should have been separated out. It was just badly put together. So, and it was a very, very important book. So it's interesting to me that in all the years of Scientology's existence, Hubbard never went back over that book to clean it up. He was perfectly okay with it being in the completely fucked up, messed up, horrible, horrible state it was. Proudly, this is my book on the tone scale, on emotions. Man, dude, it's nothing to be proud of. Science of Survival is a horribly written book. It's also the book where Hubbard, talks about, the leper colony in Venezuela or Guatemala or something, and how the best solution for all those people suffering from leprosy was to put them on a boat and sail them out in the middle of a river and blow it up. And he thought he gave that as an example in Science of Survival of how to deal with social problems or issues, right? In addition to all the stuff in Science of Survival about how psychotic and crazy anybody on the LGBT spectrum is. That's all from Science of Survival. And Dianetics, the first book, also gets into that. Okay, and then as far as the ethics book is a compilation of policy letters that Hubbard wrote or had written over the years about Scientology ethics, and they were all just kind of put together in one book. At first, it was a pretty small book. It just covered some basics of ethics and the condition formulas. But then it was greatly expanded when they did the Golden Age of Knowledge, and they put a ton of all of the ethics and justice policies in there. So everything about PTSness, everything about suppressive people, everything about the justice codes of Scientology are all laid out in that book now. But all of this was written separately from a book. These were policy letters for the most part, and some bulletins. And it was sort of compiled. It's a compiled work. And that's the Introduction to Scientology Ethics book. So are they easy to understand? The ethics book is a lot easier to understand than Science of Survival. But yeah, I think the ethics book is easy enough to understand. It's full of nonsensical ideas, but you'll understand them. Okay, Extra W. Vernon, what is the book Dianetics The Original Thesis about? Okay, so according to the lore, Hubbard was researching and had case studies of people he had worked with in a facility in Georgia, a mental health facility in Georgia, where actually it turns out he was a patient. There, Hubbard had, I guess, an episode or episodes or something. I'm a little unclear on exactly this time period and exactly what happened there, but apparently Hubbard was committed to this an asylum for a while. Or at least that's what I've come to learn recently, that I went, I didn't know about that. So later on, the rewritten history of that is that Hubbard was doing research there and he was working with patients there. Then there is, and there is the whole lore of him recovering from his war wounds at Oak Knoll Naval Hospital in California, and figuring out the Dianetics techniques there also. So, and curing himself of his war wounds, his blindness and lameness and broken back or whatever bullshit he claimed. None of that happened. None of that was true. But Hubbard said that during that time at Oak Knoll, and when he got to test his stuff out in this place in Georgia, he had these case studies of how Dianetics was developed. These were put into this book, Dianetics, the Original Thesis. This was published after Dianetics was published. There was a set of there was an article in Astounding magazine that that was that article became, if I remember this right, that article became another book called Dianetics The Evolution of a Science. But the original thesis, oh boy, yeah, I'm getting these a little mixed up in my head now. And I am so happy about that. I can't tell you how happy I am to be confusing two Dianetics books right now. That's good news to me, because that's how long it's been that I've thought about this stuff. But anyway, basically, regardless of the origin story of the book itself, I can tell you for sure what it's about is the same stuff that Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, is about, just in a slightly simplified version. But the idea is that Hubbard tries to back right his the research trail for how Dianetics came about, and all of it is fiction, because the real way that we know that Dianetics came about was that Hubbard took a hypnotism and worked it into this sort of step-by-step process that he called auditing, which would address, incidents in your past, have you go back over them and relieve, whatever the engrammic commands and stress and trauma of it that are holding those commands in place. The big breakthrough for Hubbard, the big thing Hubbard thought was the big deal about this, was that when you were experiencing pain and unconsciousness, you were actively recording everything that was happening subconsciously into this reactive mind, and that reactive mind was going to throw those words and stuff back at you later when you were in a tired state or exhausted or otherwise not fully charged up. You were going to be susceptible to these reactive commands coming at you from your subconscious that would compel you to do things that were non-optimum, right? Be violent, be self-destructive, stuff like that. All because of these engrammic commands. That was Hubbard's great big discovery, and it's not true. It wasn't a discovery of any kind. He just said it was, because he was trying to sell this covert hypnotism technique called Dianetics. And that's what Original Thesis is about, is his so-called research trail into how he figured all that out. Yeah. It's a work of incredible fiction by a fiction author. Angry Chode, which of the following do you think is more dangerous? Spending the night at a swingers bar on a holiday weekend, or spending the night in a minimum security prison? Well, I'll take the swingers bar. I don't want to be in minimum security prison. The idea of being locked up is anathema to me. I very, very, very much resist that. If you offer me the choice between being locked up and almost anything else, I'll take pretty much almost anything else. If you said spending the night in a minimum security prison or going skydiving, then we might have more. Then I might struggle a little bit more with the answer. But no, I'll go to the swingers bar. Also, is the Sea Org shrinking? As far as we know, it is. Yeah, as far as we know, it is losing members faster than it is gaining them. And the other thing about the Sea Org is the back door, the revolving door aspect of it. So, there's not everybody who leaves the Sea Org necessarily makes a big announcement about it, but the back door is always open. And when I left, let me give you an example. When I left PAC, when I was leaving the Sea Org in 2012, I think there was something about, I watched during the 9 or 10 months that it took me to leave, I watched 5 or 6 other people leave. So roughly one a month-ish, right? Now those are the only ones that I saw. There could have been others around. And of course there was a whole other, base over at the HGB where people were leaving. So they lose folks a lot, is my point. Okay.
Let's carry on here. Oh, good. Lots of questions. All right. X-Cyan. A cousin lives in Austin and was a student, then worked at the University of Texas. I'm going to ask her about Lance Kennedy and if she knew of him. Yes, please. I'd really love to know about that guy. Anything you want me to ask her? Yeah. I'd like to know if he's doing any kind of seminar work yet. I want to know if he's charging people for his time. I want to know if he's engaged in any kind of clubs or activities or social activities that he's gathering people for. Are people going to his house to hear him speak? Or anything like that. Anything. And it could have a million variations. But I'd be very, very interested in if Lance Kennedy is setting up a Lance Kennedy club for people to be part of, where they get to start hearing his special message. Or is there an organization that he has founded that they are coming for specifically? I know there's this Texan national thing that he's trying to do. Is that a club he started, or did he start that, or is that something that he is just involved with? Is he in any way, making noises about starting his own thing? Yeah, I'd like to know about that. If you find out anything about that, that would be interesting to me. Because he's a nutter, man. That guy's a lunatic. Lance Kennedy is a dangerous guy. So we'll see how much he develops that dangerousness into something truly dangerous. I mean, I say he's got wacko ideas, and he's got wacko ideas that would drive a person like him to do very wacko things to fulfill or accomplish those ideas, right, or those goals. And I don't know how far down the radicalization rabbit hole he might be, if at all. He might not be there yet, and he might avoid it. He might not become what I think he's becoming, right? So let's see where he's at. He seems to be gunning for, guru status, though. He seems to be really, really hot for that. So we'll see. That his book of the scribe thing is the thing that really pushed me over the edge. When you go out of your way to write in Old Testament style language, to write a book about, how your current beliefs are actually legacy beliefs that are, 2,000 years old and are actually God's plan, you got something going on. There's something wrong with you. I'll just say that because I believe it's true, right? I think anybody who believes so strongly in their own personal interpretation and vision of the world that they go about writing religious script, speaking for or interpreting God, I think you've completely lost the plot if that's a serious endeavor on the part of any human being, right? That's a lose the plot move, because there is no human being with that kind of insight, and they never could have that kind of insight. It's impossible. Impossible. Right? So, and if he's going to start claiming that God talks to him like, David Green, of the CEO of Hobby Lobby, right? And that he has these full-blown conversations with God, and that God's telling him exactly what to do because he's a prophet, you're just a lunatic. I mean, you're just completely out to lunch, So I'd like to know how far along, how long that's been going on. Yeah, it showed. I thought so. I know the Texas independence thing is not a brainchild of Lance Kennedy, but again, you can have a group, and then you can have little subgroups, and you can have people who get real enthusiastic about themselves and become thought leaders and start their own thing within that bigger context, right? So I'm not trying to imply that the entire Texas independence movement is, some cult under Lance Kennedy, and this is all his creation. I don't think that at all. I think that he's glomming onto a movement so that he can get influence and power, and that this aligns with maybe his own personal goals. He clearly has personal goals of a very odd nature. But it was the religious scripture that convinced me that he's lost touch, right? That Texas independence thing is nutty enough, but that's not like, straitjacket material. That's just a stupid idea, right? But when you start writing religious texts and interpreting God, that's when I'm like, you're kind of a special person, aren't you? And I don't really go for that kind of thing too much. Okay, George Smiley, here we go. Unpopular opinion. There's little Clearwater can do to curb Church Scientology, which can drain the budget with legal warfare and buying up properties. You're absolutely right. Voters hate Church Scientology, but they don't want to pay the taxes to fight. Probably true. And yes, it is an unpopular opinion that Scientology is going to end up having its way because citizens just can't really organize themselves effectively enough to fight back against it. That's a narrative that makes an awful lot of sense. It also is a kind of a doomer narrative, though. So yes, but no, because it's not always true that that the citizenry is powerless against, a mega corporation or an international conglomerate or a criminal enterprise. Citizens can and have and are right now pushing back and rising up and organizing effectively to push back against all kinds of corporate malfeasance and nonsense. That's happening, and I'm loving it. And I want to be part of that stuff, right? That's why I talk the way that I talk. So I don't subscribe to the idea that it is a lost cause, or that Clearwater is a foregone conclusion that Scientology is going to own downtown Clearwater. We're not there yet, and we don't need to give up before the fight is over. We don't need to do that. But I definitely get where you're coming from, that the power the city council has is only what they have. And I believe I've done, if I remember right, the last time I talked to Mark Bunker on my podcast many years ago, we discussed this, right? What kind of power do they have? What can they do? What can't they do? They certainly do not have the right to ban people from the city or kick Scientology to the curb or drive them out of town or something. We're not in those days anymore, right? Where people can just, form up a posse and drive somebody out. And that's, mostly a good thing. Yeah. Yes, Chode, I get it about Austin. Totally get it. Texas is a weird place. I don't understand Texas. I never have. The people down in Texas, and especially the legislatures and leadership in Texas, are lunatics as far as I can tell. I just can't get my head around how those people think, because it's very, very weird. The things they want to do. Greg Abbott is just such a dick, and Texas is led by the very worst of us, and I don't know how much that reflects the population, but they keep getting elected to office. I mean, Ted Cruz is a senator from Texas, and Ted Cruz is one of the worst human beings you'd ever want to have anything to do with. The guy is just such a little slimy snake, right? He's just awful. So I don't get why Texas keeps putting those people in charge if Texans have their head on straight, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So so Texas just makes it's weird. Yeah, it's a platypus. Austin is a platypus. Yeah, no, George, I get it. I'm not trying to call you names or something. It's just hard. It is hard, and this is, if there's ever been an example. Here's a summation for you about Clearwater. If there's ever been an example of bureaucratic dysfunction operating, at normal pace, it's Clearwater. They're told exactly what the problem is. They are told numerous times by numerous people who have survived Scientology. They have been warned and warned and told and told. And yet, here we are. See, the city council can't do all kinds of things. But that doesn't mean they don't have any power at all. And the fact that they keep rolling over is to me the biggest indication of bureaucratic dysfunction, right? The biggest example of that I've ever seen. It really is extraordinary. It's been so many decades of these people just sticking their head in the sand, knowingly or unknowingly, right? Intentionally or not. Doesn't really matter to me. That's what they do. They stick their head in the sand. Make it go away. Make it, not my problem, not my problem. I don't know. I don't know. It makes me, and of course, Scientology is not the only problem that this council's dealing with. It's the only problem we're dealing with, right? So we very hyper-focus on that one issue. Obviously, the City Council of Clearwater has much more on its plate than just the Scientology problem. And maybe, if I'm being really generous and kind, that obfuscates or, waters down the Scientology problem in their eyes as a bureaucratic body. But it shouldn't. There is no greater existential threat to Clearwater than the Church of Scientology. Period. And I think our disappointment has not been, the bureaucratic dysfunction. It's been the lack of recognition that is true, right? That we know that's true, but they don't. That's frustrating. Okay, XJW Vernon. Would you contact Janis, Gillum, Grady, and Mark Fisher for an interview? Do you know them while in Scientology? I did not know either of them when I was in Scientology. I have contacted them a couple times, and it never really works out for us to connect. And I have made efforts in that direction, and it doesn't happen. So I don't know what else to say about that. I'm not bad-mouthing anybody. I don't have a bad opinion about either Janis or Mark in this regard. It just hasn't worked out. And, that's where it's at. Xion, what is the psychology behind the illusory truth effect? How can we deal with it? Okay. Because you guys know that I love looking stuff up and going to Wikipedia because I don't want to give you anything wrong. I wanted to look this up first to make sure we're clear. The illusory truth effect, also known as the illusion of truth effect, validity effect, truth effect, or the reiteration effect, there's a lot of ways to describe this, is the tendency to believe false information to be correct after repeated exposure. This phenomenon was first identified in a 1977 study at Villanova University and Temple University. When truth is assessed, people rely on whether the information is in line with their understanding or if it feels familiar. The first condition is logical, as people compare new information with what they already know to be true. Repetition makes statements easier to process relative to new, unrepeated statements, leading people to believe that the repeated conclusion is more truthful. It's the path of least neurological resistance to go down the familiar and accept it than to have to process new information and compare and contrast. There's more cognitive load. It takes more energy, literally, to do the thinking. So people will tend in the direction of the familiar with what they already know. This very, very, very much lines up also with the concept of confirmation bias, right? How we're looking for the things that reinforce what we already believe to be true, because it's easier to do that than it is to be challenged by new, unfamiliar information and have to get your head around it. If you've ever had to learn a new board game or learn a new process at work, that you didn't particularly ask for, but here it is, and you got to get your head around it. It can be hard, right? It's this new thing. You're, what's this concept? What's the theme of this game? What is it? What are the rules of this thing? How much is it like this other game that I'm really super familiar with? Oh, it's not like that at all? You mean I have to learn this whole new thing? It gives some people headaches, right? It's like, all this energy I have to, exert to learn stuff or think about stuff, right? The illusory truth effect has also been linked to hindsight bias, in which the recollection of confidence is skewed after the truth has been received. This is also interesting. In a 2015 study, researchers discovered that familiarity can overpower rationality, and that repetitively hearing that a certain statement is wrong can paradoxically cause it to feel right. Researchers observed the illusory truth effect's impact even on participants who knew the correct answer to begin with, but were persuaded to believe otherwise through the repetition of a falsehood. The illusory truth effect plays a significant role in fields such as advertising, news media, political propaganda, and religious indoctrination. So, question, how can we deal with it? I'll relate it to, in terms of the psychology behind it, it itself is research psychology, but I believe you would find underneath it principles coming from conditioning theory, the idea that, how do we learn? Repetition. Why do we learn it that way? Because your body becomes habituated to a series of motions, a series of actions, a series of thoughts, a series of beliefs. It's the muscle memory is not in your muscles. It's neural memory, and that memory is when you repeat something over and over and over again, you are reinforcing neural pathways or connections, and you're connecting them harder, you're connecting them more and more and more. This is what becomes habit for us, or muscle memory, or that kind of thing. This is conditioning. It works. It absolutely works. That's why we do it all the time. That's why learning is repetitive. You have to, you very, 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 very rarely do we learn something just one time, right? We have to go over and over and over and over it. And we have to go over it in different ways under different conditions, but it's the going over the thing that convinces us of the truth or validity of a thing, which is interesting. Because once we're convinced of the truth or validity of a thing, then it's awful hard to break it up, right? You're literally making pathways in your brain or in your nervous system. You're digging trenches. There's a good way to put it. You're digging trenches. And the more and more and more you travel that trench, the more and more you're using that pathway, the deeper it goes, right? The harder the bigger and wider and deeper that trench becomes, because it's just servicing, neurons going down those pathways over and over and over again. I believe that's basically, the sort of the reasoning behind it, or how that sort of thing works. And as far as how to deal with it, this is why I always talk about critical thinking as a discipline, because it's the only way I know how to deal with it, is disciplining yourself to challenge yourself constantly. Because we don't have options in how we go about learning stuff. The brain works the way the brain works, in other words. So repetition is just part of the picture. And you want that. There's plenty of things, plenty of skills we want, plenty of things we want, habits we want to create, where we really want that. But when we don't, I believe, by understanding the anatomy of it, that's what we're doing in our brain or in our nervous system, right, throughout our body. I think once you know that, it gives you a leg up to being able to counter it when your body or your situation or your circumstances demand that you learn or do or whatever a thing that you're finding non-optimum now. Maybe you had a habit that fit a particular context or time or whatever, and you want to bust that up. The only way to do it is to undo it. You gotta fill in that trench. And how do you do that? Well, you gotta kind of make a new one. You get some new habit, new way of doing this, as far as I understand it. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah, that's true. Let me see if there's anything else about this that I want to say. Talks a little bit about the hindsight bias here. In a 1979 study, participants were told that repeated statements were no more likely to be true than unrepeated ones. Despite this warning, the participants perceived repeated statements as being more true than unrepeated ones. Studies in 1981 and 1983 showed that information deriving from recent experience tends to be viewed as more fluent and familiar than new experience. A 2011 study built on this finding by demonstrating that, generally speaking, information retrieved from memory is more fluent or familiar than when it was first learned, and thus produces an illusion of truth. The effect grew even more pronounced when statements were repeated twice, and yet more pronounced when they were repeated 4 times. The researchers thus concluded that memory retrieval is a powerful method for increasing the so-called validity of statements, and that the illusion of truth is an effect that can be observed without directly polling the factual statements in question. So, if you want to counter this, the first thing that occurs to me is you must expose yourself to a wide range of viewpoints and ideas so that you don't fixate or over-repeat any one to the detriment of others. How that works in one's life would be very, very individual to them, as to how you go about learning things or how you go about exposing yourselves to things. But it really seems to me that the antidote is exposing yourself to a diversity of ideas and opinions, so that whatever is being repeated is across the spectrum of ideas, so you don't hyperfixate on one slice of those ideas as the only thing that can be true because you heard it a lot. Right? I mean, this is why echo chambers happen. Because we just keep repeating the same shit to each other over and over and over again. So get out of an echo chamber if you're in one. Get out there and hear a wide variety of things. That way, this won't have as much of an effect on you as it could. That's about as practical, I think, as I can get with that. Dandy Warhol, did you see the Odyssey? Not yet. But I do look forward to it. I know tons and tons and tons of people have. I've seen and heard an awful lot about this movie. And I think one of the reasons that I am now questioning the common wisdom on the internet is because it's become very, very clear to me with the Odyssey. Actually, it's been clear for a few months, but really this is the kind of, cherry on top of this whole idea, is there's a dedicated group of people on social media who are really, really dedicated to making things fail. And that very much applies in the entertainment industry. There are a whole swath of channels on YouTube that started off ostensibly as entertainment review or commentary channels, but became hater channels. And that's a shame. But it's the nature of the algorithm, because it rewards conflict, and it rewards divisiveness, and it rewards hate. That's where you get all your viewers. And if you aren't that, you don't get as many viewers. It's a fact. So it's predictable. It was predictable that this would happen, that a lot of critics online of movies or entertainment media become not just critics. They lose their plot and they become haters, active haters. And I think the Odyssey is probably one of the most stellar examples of, that writ large right now. And I think that we're going to start seeing a kickback on that. I think, in other words, the pendulum's going to, start swinging in the other direction again. And it needed to go in that direction because Hollywood was putting out an awful lot of crap. And it was worth hating on. But not everything out there is crap. And I don't know about the Odyssey. Maybe it is crap. I've heard a lot of different opinions about it. But general consensus is pretty damn positive. So that's made me very curious about it. But I'm waiting for I'm probably not going to go see it in the theater. I don't know that I really have the expendable income to go do that at this time. It's interesting to me, but not so interesting. I'll tell you why I'm going to wait for streaming, really, is because I was so disappointed by Oppenheimer. It's not a bad movie, but I went to the IMAX. I went to see the grand spectacle of Oppenheimer and the exploding bomb and all of that. And I wondered what the hell I was doing there watching this on IMAX because it didn't do it for me. And again, I'm not saying Oppenheimer's a bad movie. I'm not saying don't go see it. It's a very unique movie, and it kind of threw me off, and I didn't really like the way it was put together. There were choices made as to how to make that and how that movie was made that I didn't agree with. So, so I don't know what he's doing to the Odyssey in that sense, I'll find out. But I'm not keen to go watch it in IMAX. That's not a selling point for me, like it would have been with, Batman Begins or something if that had been in IMAX. All right. George Smiley. At what point do Scientologists learn the axioms? Initiates would need to be pretty invested in Scientology because they're complicated and illogical, for sure. The axioms are first given to people on auditor training. I think it's when do you start seeing the axioms? There's discussion. The very first time I ever saw a Scientology axiom was on the Pro TR's course, the professional TR's course, actually. So even before the auditor training, because the formula of communication is an axiom in Scientology, and you have to become familiar with that when you do the Pro TR's course. The whole cause, distance, effect with intention, attention, duplication, understanding, and a whole laundry list of other stuff that Hubbard throws into the mix of what is communication. So I know that's there. As far as reading all of them, I don't think the axioms are covered on any course except for the book course for the book Scientology 0 to 8, which is the book I showed you guys, where I was reading from the axioms, all of the Dianetics axioms and all of the Scientology axioms and all of the scales and the tone scales and the no to mystery scale and the sex scale and the effect scale and the this scale and the that scale and the mother's uncle scale. They're all in that book. Hubbard just loves scales. So he just thought it made him so sciencey to put things on scales. So there's tons and tons of them in Scientology, and they're all in that book. And there is a book course that people do as part of the basics now, where they'll study that. So I think the answer to the question at this point for modern Scientology is actually that book course. So as part of reviewing or studying the basics would be the answer now. It used to be that it would be something you'd start getting into when you did your auditor training. But now, yeah, book courses. All right. Also, George, how would Scientologists react to someone collecting first edition Scientology books, the ones with cheesy covers? Is everything but the latest edition material considered out tech? Yes, it is. It's outdated and shouldn't be used. And yes, that's a tech D grade, and Hubbard said don't do that. So there's another one of your built-in contradictions. But if somebody were doing a collection, like as a collector's item sort of thing, like for history or legacy's sake, I don't think Scientologists would particularly get on their high horse about it. But if somebody were referring to those books in preference to the new stuff, right? We got to shoot you at dawn with as I love one of the expressions Hubbard used one time. I'm going to totally rip it off. We're going to shoot you with dull bullets. I thought that was a pretty good one, actually. And you will be shot with dull bullets if you go using old stuff in favor of the new stuff. They will definitely come down on you like a ton of fucking bricks, right? Because we had whole shred parties for all the old materials. I mean, just full on, go burn them, go scrap them, go dump them in a pit of acid. You know, we just had truckloads of old materials being gathered up on Pac Base in Los Angeles when the basics that came out. When new stuff comes out, the old stuff, is gone. So so it was funny to find there were 3 times. There were 2 orgs and 1 person in PAC who had a special file cabinet, and they didn't really tell everybody about it, and that's where they kept their old stuff, the original red volumes, the original green volumes, all the old books, right? But here was something I found. Since we're talking about this, let me tell you how fucked up it is. This is interesting. I think you'll find this interesting. I'm going to see if I can explain this. There are old issues, old bulletins, where there were technical procedures broken down as to how to write stuff or indicate stuff on worksheets, or how to read the e-meter and what you were looking for. And those processes and those descriptions changed. They would be revised or canceled. But all the references to those processes, or the way that those processes called for symbolically, for you to write stuff down, all the references to that were not necessarily scoped out and changed at the same time. So you cancel this bulletin that describes how to do process X. And it says in this bulletin, for example, and I'm making this up, but it was something similar to this, is the example I'm thinking of here. It was from 1969, I think. There was this bulletin that said you mark a slash if the meter reads, and you mark an X or something if it doesn't read. So you go down a list, and if it reads, you put in a slash, and if it doesn't read, the double, the X. And then you could assess it again, and if it doesn't read this time, you make that slash into an X pretty easily. You just mark, it didn't read again. So now that slash becomes an X. The slash and X thing survives years later in another bulletin. But nobody understands what the fuck that bulletin is actually saying, because the original process X has been canceled and all of those bulletins thrown into a pit of acid, and they're in the old red volumes that nobody can have. So it's the only place that you could actually define what this current bulletin is saying to do is in a canceled issue that nobody's supposed to have. So therefore, everybody is saddled with a misunderstood word or symbol because of institutional Scientology destroying the original work. I hope that all makes sense. I ran into this as a supervisor a couple times. And one of the most important bulletins in all of Scientology case supervision has this reference in it to this process that was canceled. And everyone, until I found this out, when I was still in, I never understood this line of this bulletin, and I realized nobody else did either. Because I was a supervisor. I was a course room supervisor, and people would ask me about this, and I go, oh, well, there's this reference here. It was the wrong reference. I was completely wrong, and so was everybody else. Because the place we needed to find the actual answer had been destroyed. So, I don't know. I find that interesting. Right? In their desperation to destroy the old and only keep it new. Right? There's an example of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Right? Within the Scientology context, they've created their own impossible situation of being completely unable to understand something L. Ron Hubbard wrote because they trashed his earlier work and refused to keep it around. It's a big secret. You can't have these old books. You know? It's that kind of self-defeating stuff that is invisible and yet everywhere, right? Throughout Scientology. Because they've destroyed so much old stuff. So much old stuff is gone. They've edited lectures. They've taken whole paragraphs, whole pages of stuff out of Hubbard's original works, right? And they hide it. It's interesting. Don't get to talk about that whole thing very much, so thanks for asking about that, George. That was kind of interesting. All right, Raymond Vanderstelt. Many countries are facing an aging population. You bet they are. And at the same time, because of the highest cost of living suck as rent, high cost of living suck as rent, many people feel they can't afford to have children. What is your opinion? Oh, okay. All right, I get it. Yeah, you're talking about the population demographic problem. There's a lot to say about this. This was something that I first started learning about a couple of years ago. And when I was trying to figure out what the hell's going on in the world, right? And I took, this was right after Trump was elected for his second or third term or whatever fucking, bullshit they're spinning now. But it was after he was elected for his second term, I kind of dived in real deep to figure out what the hell is going on in this world. That this is happening, right? And I didn't come up with real super solid answers. I've shared with you guys a lot of stuff and various thoughts I've had and conclusions I've come to that are always up for debate or always up for, change. But one of the things that I came across during this time, searching, was the demographic problem on the planet Earth. And I watched lectures and videos from people whose life work is studying populations, population growth, population decline, why, how, right? What are the numbers? I watched presentations at the World Economic Forum. I watched presentations by people who, have PhD level degrees in this stuff, and because I wanted to get the straight dope from the people who really knew what the hell's going on with the diminishing population sizes. And it turns out it's a problem all over the planet. Each country has its own bit of a struggle session with this, but every single country has now or will be facing a population crisis of some kind in the next few generations. China's already experiencing it. Germany is deep into it. Japan is full-blown, heading toward a brick wall at 90,000 miles an hour when it comes to their rate of reproduction. And the math on it is actually not complicated. It's actually very, very simple. Every single couple, married couple, every single couple in the world who gets together needs to have 2 kids just to replace themselves. The man and the woman, right, who are having the kids. They got to have 2 kids just to replace themselves when they die. So in order for population increase to continue, people need to be having more than 2 kids. And they're not. And in fact, the average is more like, 1.2, 1.5, something like that. It's not 2 or 3. And if it's not 2.1 as an average, then this is what's going to happen to the population size. Now, there's lots of opinions about whether that's a good or a bad thing, and I'm not here to make to right now, and answering this question, I'm not going to say that it's inherently good or inherently bad that our population is declining. It is what it is. It's happening regardless of what you think about it, though. That's a fact. And the fact is irrefutable and really undeniable at this point. The math has been done. The people who know about this stuff have been very clear about it and have been talking about it for years. It's only now really hitting major media so that everybody's learning about it. Like I said, I learned about it a few years ago. And like AI, I've been trying to say stuff about it, and people look at me like I'm coming from Mars. They just like, you're out to lunch, Chris. You have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, okay. And now people catch up, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of did know what I was talking about. Anyway, just a little bit of a about that. But with declining populations come effects, right? Consequences. And we have built a social safety nets all over the world. Countries all over the world have built social safety nets on the premise that population will, remain steady or continue to grow. Therefore, out with the old and in with the new, and the new growing population of young people who eventually will become old will be replaced by a growing population of younger people. And it's sort of, this ever kind of growing thing. And because of that systemic thinking, we can create something like Social Security and know that it will be a program that will continue into the future because the kids will keep coming up and paying the taxes and doing the things so that we can support the old people. And even if there's a lot of old people, there will be more young people than old people, and therefore the math will work out. But the math hasn't been mathing in quite some time because of this population decline. There are many, many, many other factors as to why we see decline or economic disparity happening in the world. It's not just a matter of population decline. This is one of many factors. But it's an important one, because once you have less people, there's no just thinking happy thoughts and more people show up. Now, I was told years and years ago, when this was first coming across my plate, even before I went into the deep dive of, watching World Economic Forum videos and stuff, that that the reason for this, and nobody really has an accepted, agreed upon answer to why does this happen. There isn't a settled science consensus view that I'm aware of as to why this occurs. People have all kinds of ideas about it. But I want to be clear about something. Now, because when this was first explained to me by people who know way more about it than I do, we need to be very, very clear that this is not a short-term cultural reaction or pendulum swing within one generation. This is not because of abortion policy in the United States or lack of abortion availability. The percentages of population growth or decline based on abortion stuff it's mathematically insignificant compared to the broader causes of why this happens. And the big answer to the question of why is it that populations grow and then decline has to do with how much of the population lives in metropolitan city areas versus rural areas. And when that population apparently when the population goes over 50% in the cities, you start seeing population decline. Now, there are things you can do about that, but when you have a long-term situation of more people in the cities than out in the country, in the rural territories, kids are more of a burden and problem and economic issue for people who live in the cities than they are for people in the rural zones. And it's not just farms, but I'm just saying that I'm making this comparison because it kind of is that difference. Because kids are hard to have in the city, especially now over the last few generations. And this is a generational issue. This isn't a short-term thing. So over generations, people start naturally, organically having less kids when they're city dwellers. And so when you got a majority of your population living in the cities and both parents are working, right? When you have other factors driving economic disparity where you can't have stay-home moms or stay-home dads, I don't care which, but you can't have one of them. There's nobody there to care for the kids. So it becomes an economic burden to care for the kid because you have to put them in daycare. You have to get them to school. You have to have after-school programs. You have to have this. You have to have that. You have to have this other thing. It's expensive as fucking hell to have a kid in a city. It's not as expensive to have a kid out in the rural areas. And there's more utility for the kids. They actually have function. In the city, kids are a bother, a nuisance. What? Get out of here, you kids. You know? Anyway, I'm overgeneralizing because I'm trying to keep it simple, but and I'm not, so expert in this that I can go into, leagues and leagues of minutiae detail about it. But I understand this to be the basic cause for the problem. Now, when you're a country like China, and you have generationally enforced a one-child rule, and you have enforced with violence, you have enforced abortion on people at a population level, not just here or there, but everywhere, all at once, dedicatedly. No more kids. No more kids. Right? You are literally putting yourself as the bannerhead, right, of the movement of let's decrease our population. And the people in China did that on purpose, right? The leadership in China did that on purpose with the one-child policy. And this resulted in an increase in that rate of contraction. Japan has had very, very, very serious issues with overworking the fuck out of their population for generations. And they are exhausted people, and they don't reproduce. And they're socially, there are issues, right? And it's not just Japan, but I'm just pointing out Japan has this real big problem too, not because of a one-child policy, but because of other cultural factors, other choices that were made by the Japanese people resulted in less Japanese people. And that's a problem for them. And this is a problem country by country, place by place, all over the world. The only places I'm aware of right now where this is not a huge problem is, I understand the United States hasn't yet peaked or is on its way to getting there, but it's not there quite yet, but predictably it will get there in the next couple generations. And sub-Saharan Africa apparently is not experiencing this. They are experiencing a population growth, which means that there's going to be an awful lot of sub-Saharan Africans in the world in about 100 years. Right? The world's going to look very different. And they're not the only place, of course, and things can change. You understand, I'm not saying that this is all doomer talk. I'm not even saying that the population decline is an inherently bad thing. It's a thing we're going to have to adjust to, though. And it is going to create massive, massive problems with the way we've systemically created our social safety nets. Because the math on which those safety nets are built isn't going to work for a declining population in any country where this is going on. This is also going to have massive effects on immigration, because climate change is also going to bring massive migration issues, already is, and it will get much, much, much worse as the temperatures rise. And as food scarcities start hitting, and as energy scarcities start really becoming a problem, unless we get our ass in gear on alternative energy, we are facing very, very, very serious energy issues in the coming years and decades. All of these things are coming together to form a picture of an awful lot of struggle all over the planet. And there's very little at this point that we can do about the climate change issue, but we're trying. And there's very, very little that we can do about the fact that mass migration will be happening, whether we want it or not. And the policies right now that are demonstrated by, say, the Trump administration or other far-right activities in Europe are trying desperately to build brick walls on a beach to stop the tide. It's like that, right? It's like these far-right lunatics who are like all anti-immigration, anti-immigration, anti-immigration are trying to stem a tide that is going to bowl them over. Because once the migrations start, they're not going to be stopped so easily. Because people just are not going to be able to literally live in certain parts of this planet when climate change really hits at its peak, right at its hardest. So that's all part of the big picture of what's going on. So in part of my problem with the far right exclusionary bubble world position of let's pull in our flippers every single country and take care of our own and screw globalism and screw trade and tariff the fuck out of everybody and alienate everybody and piss off all of our foreign contacts and destroy our foreign relations. My anger at that is not some lib bullshit. It's anger about what our kids and their kids and their kids are going to have to deal with because of what jerk-offs are doing now. To not prep for this future eventuality is insane. It's insanely short-sighted thinking. And to watch these people pay more attention to stock prices than the human cost of what they're doing, to me, it's anti-human. Never really put it that way before, but that's my problem with Trump and with MAGA and with Christian nationalists. They're anti-human. They want to help bring about way less people on this planet. They want to diminish the human species through their actions right now that they're engaged in. That's the future they're creating, as one of struggle and failure to utilize or deal with our resource problems or our energy problems or issues. These are people who cannot think with anything I just told you about. Everything I just described to you is completely alien to their entire way of thinking. They are children in a world where we need adults. You know? Because they don't even consider for once these kinds of issues. I mean, shit, you know, these DHS guys, the guys who are the ICE guys right now here in the United States, Tom Homan and Stephen Miller and these guys, these fucking prejudiced, biased, hateful people are so hyper-focused on make America white again that they admitted this, they never even stop and think about the economic consequences of what they're doing. They admitted this. They just, we don't even think about that. They're literally destroying our economy through their actions, through their hate. And they're the last people to see that. We've made countless movies about this. The scientists at the beginning of the movie screaming, don't do this, right? They've been screaming in real life for a very long time. And Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Peter Thiel and all of these guys, the names you know and all the names you don't know, couldn't give a fuck about any of that future. They don't care. And so when I talk about how they're the ones who are getting all the assets and control of all the resources right now, that's why it's so dangerous. It's not me speaking out of economic jealousy or something that, if I was only a billionaire too. That's not the point at all, you know? So that's what I got for you on that. Not as deep, I think, as I've gone into any of that, but that's what I got. Okay. Axion. Do you think the current cyclospora in lettuce outbreak causing explosive diarrhea is due in part to federal budget cuts to monitoring pathogens? Of course it is. Absolutely it is. They've taken apart the FDA, the CDC, all the regulatory bodies. These people are insane. They believe in unfettered, unregulated capitalism in the bottom line, and anything that services their wallet, their trust funds, their economic survival goes, right? And get rid of all these regulatory bodies and all these safety boards and all that. Yeah, of course. It has everything to do with that. We are being led by a pack of morons. RFK Jr. should be in a straitjacket. The man is insane. He's insane. He eats roadkill. I mean, what else do you want to know? That's the guy in charge of our fucking health and our health department? A guy who literally eats fucking roadkill? This is who we put in charge of our food safety? And we get highest ever measles outbreak right now? We have 3 or 4 diseases all throughout Colorado right now, all coming from bad food. This is no coincidence. These people are absolutely fucking insane. And people are going to die as a result. And it makes me so mad. Okay. Lutz. After yesterday's attack at Berlin Pride, this thought has resurfaced. Why are so many religions, and by extension cults, so anti-gay, queer, beyond misinterpreting scripture, just more control? Yeah, no, it is. It's about control, and it is about religious indoctrination. It's Leviticus on steroids, right? It is a moral. It comes down to a moral foundation that doesn't comport with reality. I mean, that's not a satisfying thing to say, but it is. It's a moral foundation problem. It's not an individual idea, belief, doctrine problem. It's a moral problem. We have a set of moral foundations installed in children all over the United States, for example, of fundamental extremism. Fundamentalist extremism, the whole Seven Mountains thing, the Bill Gothard stuff, the Duggar stuff, all the shit I talk about and have been talking about for years, and so many other people have too. The shiny, happy people, right? And like immigrants, there is nothing from a group perspective. In addition to this individual psychology and the individual belief nonsense of that, there is also a sort of a function to this. You need to have a group to hate, a minority group to hate, so as to create unity within your own group. Because these are very dysfunctional people. And morons can only run groups for so long before they fall apart. Excuse me. The whole fundamentalist movement is only about a century old. A century and a half. And it's a reactionary movement to science, to evolutionary theory, and to the lessening of Christian belief. So the fundamentalists come out. And they're the ones who start using the word cult. Super irony. They're the ones who start using the word cult in a pejorative way to say that anybody who's not a fundamentalist Christian is part of some cult. They're the ones who started it. Yeah, that's real. And they need to unify. How do they unify? How do you get different groups of different denominations under the evangelical umbrella? How do you get them under the MAGA umbrella? How do you get them under a conservative movement umbrella, an anti-abortion movement, right? How do you do that? You create an enemy that otherwise never existed. Gay people. Wonderful. Leviticus. Yeah. Bible. Go. That's how you unify. And, you know, whether it's by calculation or just organically grown that way, that's why it persists. Right? That's why immigrants will always be the hateful bad guys, and why gay people will always be the hateful bad guys. For now. This hate wave may well pass once Christian fundamentalism, you know, finally has its undoing, because this too shall pass, right? The Christians who exist now, these evangelicals, it's a movement, it's a short-term thing, right? This isn't forever. Christianity has not always been this fucked up. And it's really, American Christianity, the evangelical brand, the Christian nationalists are fucked up people. And they have very, very fucked up ideas. But this is how they unify, is common enemy. So that's, I think, part of why so many religions and cults are that way right now. It's a right now thing. Not to say, and don't misinterpret me that it's that there's, you know, that never before in history has there been hate for gays or something. But let's take a look at history. Right? There have also been cultures we know very well, and you know, some people in America worship at the altar of the Roman Empire and the Roman culture. They were not an anti-gay culture, as far as I know. You know, so you can have some pretty crazy things happen for periods of time, and we're living in such a time, right? Other times they have other crazinesses going on. It's not an anti-gay thing; it's something else, you know. But we've always got some kind of bullshit going on because we're human beings. All right. Yeah, Sam Altman is such a piece of shit. Thanks for quoting him there, Bored Black Sheep. I just despise that guy. All right, I got to go speed run here. A few more questions to cover, and we will wrap up. Raymond, in your opinion, do you think that besides former cult members, people who feel stuck in unhealthy or toxic jobs are also drawn to ex-cult spaces? If so, why do you think that is? Oh, well, yeah, you're looking for some relief. You're looking for some understanding. Common cause. Again, organic common cause. Coercive control is the common denominator between cults, domestic violence, abusive relationship situations, gangs, and trafficking. In other words, a whole lot of stuff human beings get up to. Coercive control is a common denominator, and spaces, ex-cult spaces, are trauma spaces where people are relieving or dealing with the coercion they were under. So, of course, it would act like a bit of a magnet to other people who have also experienced coercion. That's my short answer on that one. Shane, what are some ways for an ex-cult member to build a new social network? Okay. My own experience of this is get online, get out in the real world, find meetups, find groups, find activities you are already interested in, hobbies, sports, clubs, creative endeavors, things you can get together with other people about that are not political, not charged, traumatizing things, but things, and do be political and do get involved politically, but as far as social networks go, right? Try to find, I would go after or pursue things that I have an interest in to find other people who have those same interests. And from that common ground, friendships are built, relationships are built. And that's how you build a new social network. That's how I did it, and that's how I've observed anybody else do it, in a nutshell. X-Scion. Was L. Ron Hubbard a really intelligent man or just someone with a big imagination and a coercive nature? I would say the latter more than the former. Hubbard was not a really intelligent man. He was a cunning, clever man. And there's a huge difference. He really didn't have a lot of book knowledge. He really didn't have a lot of book understanding. He did not understand how processes work or how science works. He certainly didn't understand that. He had a very, very fake surface level understanding of how science works. And he was not a deep thinker. He only pretended to be. Hubbard is he's not a stupid man, but he's a lay person who struggles to present as a very intelligent man. Flap Octopus. I love that name. Does the Illusory Truth Effect use thought-terminating cliches like slogans and terms the group uses? How did you change your vocabulary after leaving? Okay. Yes, you can repeat thought-terminating cliches to yourself and believe that they are true and have the Illusory Truth Effect. Yes, that's absolutely how that kind of thing happens. This is why I say, and so many other people in the ex-cult space say, dump the language as quickly as you possibly can. Dump it. Just stop using it. It forces those trenches to get filled up faster. It forces new trenches to get built, right, neurologically. So, and it will therefore cause you to, it forces you to think, to engage. And that's a good thing when you're out of a cult. Especially when you're first out, you really want to be thinking. You want to be re-examining stuff. You want to be questioning all the beliefs. And dumping the language is fastest way to give your brain a break and kind of force it into not operating in neutral, you could say. Yeah. Okay. And finally, doesn't the statement attributed to Napoleon that he who saves his country does not violate any law signal authoritarian intent? Does it apply today? Yeah, basically Napoleon was offering an ends justify the means rationality there. And the law is what allows a country to exist in a structured, calm, peaceful way. So when you see people, especially at the leadership level, like Napoleon, like Trump, like Putin, like Xi, like Erdogan, like all the rest, who decry their own system of power, you know you're dealing with somebody who is trying to throw acid onto the works to make things more chaotic and awful than they are so that those strong men can take more power, more assets, more to themselves. It is our systems that stop them from doing that. That's why we built those systems in the first place and forced them to agree to those systems. I mean, Magna Carta, right? Anyone? So we need them to conform to our systems, not decry our systems and throw acid on them. And Napoleon, interesting guy, Napoleon. But ends justify the means is not a great moral philosophy or a philosophy that builds things. It's a philosophy that destroys things. So if you want things destroyed, more power to Napoleon. All right. I have gone over. It is time for us to wrap up. Boy, did I soapbox a lot today. I hope it went okay. I hope the points I made were at least sensible. I hope they came across sensibly. Thank you very much for your viewership and your support, guys. Always appreciated. Please do follow me on Patreon, support my channel, support my work. I really, really could use the help. Thank you very much. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.